This new task force that is being established to deal with Katrina, who will be in charge? Who will run this operation? A 1-star, a 2-star, a 3-star, or a 4-star general?
Our understanding at this point, Wolf, and the announcement is not officially out yet, is it will be a 3-star Army general. It will be.
This is a complex problem. It's called a disaster. Look up the meaning of a disaster.
Friday, September 2nd, 4 days after Katrina hit, the cavalry has arrived.
Hey, weapons down! Weapons down, damn it! Put your weapons down!
All I have to say this morning is hooray for Honoré. This guy seems to be the perfect guy for this job. Seeing him in the streets of New Orleans, telling them to put their M16s down, for gosh sakes, and let's get some tension out of here. Let a little steam off, please.
You saw Honoré yesterday doing really sort of almost symbolic things, but at one point, our Barbara Starr, who was right along there with him, witnessed him come up to a mother who had twin babies, and she was struggling to even hold on to them. I mean, he took the babies out of her arms, gave them to his soldiers, and arranged for them to immediately be medevaced to a ship offshore. Now, that's just one person, but what it sends a message that they understand the problem. And of course, his whole point about having the soldiers put their guns down, again, reinforce that they're here to help. They're not here to, intimidate people.
Well, I'll tell you where blame doesn't lie, and that's with a straight shooting, take charge John Wayne dude who never got stuck on stupid. He was exactly what the Gulf Coast needed right after Hurricane Katrina.
Don't get stuck on stupid, reporters.
That's BS. I will take that on behalf of every first responder down there. It's BS.
That's right. We'll never forget General Russel Honoré's one-liners, but we'll remember what he did for the hurricane victims even more. When President Bush assigned this Louisiana-born general to command Joint Task Force Katrina, Honoré knew this would be one of the most difficult missions in his career, but he was ready, and he became an overnight hero.
Please join me in welcoming General Russel Honoré.
Thank you, and thanks for coming to New Orleans. This is a big deal because you hear people get to work. And you're in the business of getting people jobs so they can work. Because people without a job, it's hard to find a purpose. When I go out and talk to CEOs or when I used to visit new unit commanders, I said, what's you proud of? Well, we're very proud of our process. We make the best widgets, or we fly the best airplanes. I said, I could give a less about your piston process. Tell me about your people. I think you ought to restate that on what you should be most proud of. You should be most proud of your people. And there are a lot of people worried about, for a while, was the robot going to take the job? And now there are people worried about, is the AI going to take the job? And there are some things to be concerned about in the creative space. But show me an AI or a robot that can be creative at making gumbo. Make some of that now. There's still things that are getting on an airplane with no pilot. I ain't doing it. It ain't gonna happen. Machines can mess up. Humans can mess up. But how do we keep that message, the importance of the people in the business? Now, if you paid any attention to that little film, I bet you half of you are wondering, what happened to them two babies? The mom moved them to Houston. She was a single mom. Got a job working for the Houston, Texas as a cook. Those little boys graduated in May. One of them is in the United States Marine Corps right now. And the other one is studying engineering in Atlanta. Now think about this. They were about 8 months old then. What a job and opportunity make and a difference in a family. Because without a job, it's hard to find your purpose. And let's talk about that for a minute. Is how do you help people find that job that help them define their purpose? I remember my grandfather telling me one time, I'd gotten up in the morning to go milk cows. It was about 4:30 in the morning. I did that from the 12th grade till I was a junior in college. And I was complaining it was cold outside and raining. And I was complaining about having to go out in the weather and face them old dairy cows at about 5 in the morning and start moving them and start milking them. And he said, boy, without a job, you have no purpose. A job is a blessing. A job is a blessing. I did a piece for NPR you might want to catch up on sometime. To work is a blessing. And that's what he actually said. I said job. To work is a blessing. But it's a good piece because it described this concept of what happened to people when they can't work. What happened to people when they can't work? Because that lady was stuck in this city because this storm hit the 29th of the month. She's got 2 babies living on government assistance. She didn't have a credit card to call Nashville and say, reserve me a room. She didn't have a car to get there. She was literally stuck here with her babies. Because what happened when people don't have a work, they come to that class of what we call poor. And poor people are not free. Poor people don't get to pick their doctors. What are some of the other aspects of being free? To live where you want, right? Poor people don't get to pick where they want. They get what's available. You're not free. When it get cold, who's the coldest? The poor. When it get hot, who suffers the most? The poor. Because they don't have the means for people that don't, because people don't have a job. Many of the people here in this city that work in the hotel and hospitality business here, they have multiple jobs. Things have gotten a little better, but not much better. They struggle. Let's walk forward a little bit into this conversation about purpose. Let me ask you a question. What, in your mind, are the 2 most important days of your life? Yell it out. All right, that's what. What's the 2 most important days in your life? Huh? Birthday. What else? Huh? Payday. Okay, that's a good one. I hadn't heard of that one before. That's a good one. Many times I get shot out, well, today I got married and today my children were born. It is an often answer. And I was asked that question myself after going through a pretty emotional experience, and I answered it the normal way. And this preacher told me, this chaplain who had come to see me, thought I needed a little mentoring, a little calming down. He said, Colonel at the time, why don't you think about it this way? The 2 most important days in your life is the day you were born. And there's a higher power that allows you to be born. The second most important day in your life is when you figure out why you were born? What's your purpose? Where do you fit in this family? Where do you fit in this society? What's your purpose? People like to know they have a purpose. That if they don't show up to work, there's some shit that's not going to happen. You with me? There's things that's not going to happen the way it would normally happen. Because you're in a position that gives you purpose. Because the small things matter. Next slide, please, Bar. Mitchell. Wait, Mitchell, next one. Mitchell, there you go. I want to talk to you a little bit about leadership in the new normal by using this war story here. Because I do believe we have some great challenges coming in the front of us. As we go from 7 to 10 billion people, there are going to be enormous challenges for the companies that you help operate. Let's think about it. We're right at 7.5 billion now, and we're going to 10 billion. Enormous challenges. We have to raise 30% more food on less arable land with more frequent droughts. Some tremendous challenges in this new normal that's presented to us that we got to deal with. Our first American citizens, they had something to do with it. They had to win our freedom. The generation that you're working with are going to have to save civilization as we know it. Because when we go from 7 to 10 million people, I can tell you what, we got less clean drinking water this year, and we're going to have less than we had last year, and we're going to have less clean drinking water next year than we got this year. That problem's got to be solved. We're going to have to raise 30% more food on less land with less water. That problem's got to be solved. Some of you represent companies that's going to provide that workforce that's going to do that, or that environment for the scientists and engineers to solve that problem. When we go from 7 to 10 billion people, many of us in this room will be gone when that happens by 2050. Well, I'm speaking for myself. It's a pretty young group, and looking at the demographics of this almost looks like a she shed. This might be the first conference that I've been at with this many women in charge of shit. This is pretty good. God bless you. Normally it's a bunch of old white guys. Nothing against them. I praise them when I see them, so I'm sucking up, but it's a fair observation. One might say, when you look at where we came from as a nation, the collective of us, it was born through a mission around this word freedom. And General Washington and his compatriots was inspired by this concept of we want to be free. He came to America. We don't want somebody spelling out what religion we've got to be, who we can marry. You have to work, do the same work that your parents did. We want to be free, and they're willing to fight for it. And as you look at this boat, at the time this happened, our capital in New York had been burned, and the one in New York had been burned, and the one in Philadelphia was threatened. And on Christmas Eve, on this cold, bitter night, General Washington led his soldiers across this river. It was a night river crossing. What this goes to show, if people buy into the mission, they'll be willing to do just about anything for the team and for the company. Because if you buy into the mission, how do you get the employees of the team to realize that they will benefit from the bounty of success? So when the team meets its annual goal, it's just not the C-suites getting Land Rovers. You with me? They bought into the mission. They were not trained to be soldiers. They were farmers and shoemakers and butchers And some of them were school teachers. But they bought into the mission of wanting to be free. Because that we said, is this picture inclusive of everything? No, but because by the end of the war, 20% of Washington's soldiers were African American slaves. They bought into this shit. And they weren't free. But they believed that one day what? They would be free. That's what happened when you get people to buy into a mission. That they will get to benefit from the bounty of success. And the Declaration of Independence has set forward that we would all be free. Then later on there was a higher court and Congress said, oh, well, not so sure. And it took over 200 years, right? And we saw a black man ride around in Air Force One. That's how long it took. But when people buy into a mission that they will benefit from the bounty of success, nothing is impossible inside a team. How do you build that into your people that we can do this? We're going to do it as a team, and everybody going to benefit from it, from the person that cleaned the building to the person that makes sure the office is set up properly for a meeting, or the security guard down at the front desk. You don't think the security guard is important? Let a mass shooter come in. Hello? With me? Everybody's important. And when the organization is successful, how everybody get a piece of that bounty of success? That is the parallel to how do you build this into the corporate culture? That people buy into the mission. Because when they buy, nothing's impossible. Washington, untrained soldiers, they didn't have proper equipment, they didn't have proper guns. They're in bitter cold weather. Look, some of them guys don't even have gloves on. There was no ambulances if they got hurt. There was no plasma if they lost blood. Not invented yet. There was no veterans care facility, not invented yet. They fought, they put their lives on the line for a mission for which they bought into. How can we build this into our corporations and people buy into the mission? That if they see something not right, they do what? They say something. You with me? So, how do we get there? By doing the routine things right. That's the first lesson in leadership. Do the routine things right. How many failures end up in your company because somebody didn't do the routine thing right? Do the routine things well. Whether that is a periodic counseling review, whether that is following the company job book of reporting somebody that's getting a little too friendly. And as we saw in the paper this week, it could be same sex. You saw the shit that went down yesterday in the paper, right? With this big company CEO. He went from chasing the girls to he was swimming with the other fishes. He was chasing the young men in the company. Major corporation. Somebody knew about that shit. Now that company brand, what do you think happened to it today? Somebody knew. You got to do the routine things well. Now, much of that end up in the path of coming to who? HR. You got to deal with it. Do the routine things well. Some of the most disappointing in my time in the Army, and I command everything from an infantry platoon to an infantry division on the demilitarization in Korea to commanding an army that trained and mobilized over 500,000 troops while maintaining security of all their records from every state in the United States and from the territories. That's a tremendous responsibility. Do the routine things well. How do you protect those personal files? We've seen some companies that didn't protect them, and what happened? People's personal information that was provided to HR end up being in 2 or 3 different foreign countries, and people start opening credit cards in their names. How do we protect that? How do we build that? By doing the routine things well. You can't have employees watching Russian porn during the day and thinking their shit is clean. You know what I mean? You got to do the routine things well. And if somebody violates that, what you got to do? You got to do something about it. Because that could be the pathway to happen to what? Exposing the company files. And that's the way it happens. Do the routine things well. The second thing, how do we build the culture that we are in as a group and as a community to embrace the impossible? For us to survive on this earth through 2050, we're going to have to do stuff that hadn't been done before. Last couple of weeks, you saw a couple hurricanes come, and social media was full of information, and the television was 24/7. And if you sit down there and watch the Weather Channel, you just sit there and want to urinate on yourself because they scare the hell out of you. And social media reinforces it, right? But one of the good things when Katrina happened, we didn't have social media. Shit wasn't here. Hello? That's just 19 years ago. It'll be 20 years next year. 19 years ago, we didn't have it. We got involved on how we're going to solve the challenges of the day. And each generation is faced with a challenge. This was a revolutionary generation. They didn't have proper weapons. They didn't have proper equipment. Not all of them, they weren't free. And some of them got free and they left the black and the indigenous people out of that accord. And they still struggle today in many sectors. How do we make that move? To embrace what appears to be impossible. Because the future is dependent on us doing the impossible. How do we get that, and how do we bring our corporate culture in? What is one of these impossible tasks we're going to fix? We're going to create a machine that cleans water. We're going to create a machine that reduces the loss of food from the production phase to the consumption phase. I bet you 20% of the food that came out here today in many places end up going to waste. How many of you are going to drink those glasses of liquid on your table? We have to have a cultural shift. We put water out whether you want it or not. But there are people in many parts of the world can't get clean water. So how are we going to adapt? By doing the impossible. And some of you represent companies that are in that business of how do we survive based on the impact of global warming and the increased population. Embrace the impossible. Each one of you should have in your space, what is your impossible list? Point 3 that General Washington taught us is you've got to adapt to change. If you're not changing, you're falling behind. How many of you still doing stuff the same way you did it 3 years ago? Raise your hand. You ain't changed. Oh, hell. I guess I'm going to have to stay over tonight and have a couple cocktails with y'all. You got to be changing. If it ain't changed, break the shit. You with me? Because something is about to happen to you. There's too many things to adapt to in this current work environment. The available work population. How do we integrate new people with different cultures, first-generation people? How do we pull people back into the workforce that may have been in the military? How do we get that 42-year-old who company said, well, you've been working from home for 2 years, you got to move from Florida to Boston or to Chicago, and it's a sandwich. Got kids, and they're looking after their parents. Where do you place a 42-year-old with 20 years of experience and making money for the company, but they're consolidating? It's happening all over the country. Knowledge workers that were doing their job, getting their 8 hours in, plus working across time zones. How do we deal with that? How do we take advantage of that market of people that's coming out? There's a lot of folks, once you pass that 40, I mean, I don't know y'all business that well, but it's pretty hard. When you look at the veterans, you got 3 classes of veterans. You got the 1 or 2 termers, those that serve 4 to 5, 7 years. Relatively long, a little more older than the average college graduate. If they served 5 or 6 years, not more than likely, hadn't been to combat because that war has been over. Hello? But they're well trained, and if you got honorable discharge, they met the standards of discipline. Then you have the one that served 20 years, mid-30s, could have a master's degree already, have commanded a unit of 1 to 200 people. And then you got the one, the 25 or 30 year veteran that did a long career, more likely a senior non-commissioned officer or officer. How do you fit them in your organization? How do you pull them into your organization and integrate them at the leadership level? That's a challenge. But it's also what? An opportunity. How do we bring these people back into the workforce? The one that's losing their job and the ones that are transitioning from something else like the military or from government work. And now they're looking for civilian employment. We're going to have to do the impossible. They did the impossible. Every generation is going to have to do something that is impossible, that is perceived today as being impossible for us to continue to be a leader in the world. Why is that important? Well, who we're competing with? China and India. China got about 1.34 billion people, and India got about 1.3. And as we speak, India about to catch up with China. It might be passing them in the next few days, who knows? They're trying hard. What we've got in America, about 330,000 that we know about. They got 1 billion more people than we do. And we've got a bigger economy than they do. You don't think that pissed them off? Huh? It's a competitive environment. How do we get your companies to have everybody buy into the mission to be the best at producing whatever it is you're producing? Well, you've got to be the best HR person in the room. I'll share a quick story with you, and I'm going to go back and finish on the end on this business of leadership and criticism. I was sitting on a board of a multi-billion-dollar company in Atlanta, and that was a hotbed. They had 17 Fortune 500 companies there. So I ended up on this board, and about my third meeting, we were getting a review by the CEO and the legal person about personnel hires and getting pretty deep into personnel talk. I said, well, in my own language, we call the HR person in the Army the G1 or the Adjutant General. Throughout our Army, the Adjutant General was a sacred position hand-selected by the commander that was entrusted with some of the most sensitive information about dealing with people. And the adjutant general had the authority to sign for the commander. Matter of fact, the official signature for Army unit was the adjutant general, signing regulations and policies. And I said, well, where is, I said, I want to say adjutant general, but where's the HR person? Oh, general, you know, for years now, we run HR through legal. I said, that's about the dumbest shit I ever heard. So I'm going to walk in this big double door in this massive big building, and it say legal. And I'm going to go in there and complain about my boss and his hands, or his attitude, or her hands and her attitude. Make it equal, okay? I said, that's the biggest bullshit I ever heard. HR in legal? Why in the hell you just put them on the IT? I said, I just don't see that match. And lo and behold, nothing else was said. I went to the next quarterly board meeting. My check was in my brief when I got there. And guess who was sitting at the table? The HR. She was there. And it was a she, of course. She was there. The other thing I used to work on my adjutants about, or HR people, is I don't have a lot of appreciation for introverts. When you bring your ass to that meeting, you better speak up. You don't play a secondary role in this organization. Y'all with me? You don't play a secondary role in this organization. You better speak up. You got to be an extrovert too. You may not be comfortable at it, but you got to say, hey, I've got some data here we need to look at. We're meeting our hiring goals, but let's look at our promotion and discipline goals. Hello, you want to see the sad side of some stories? Go look at the promotion and discipline roles. The Army, when we got serious after the Vietnam War and we had the ability to do it, we started putting data up. And we would show what's the demographics of a 100-person unit, 17% African American, but the Article 15, which is a summary punishment by unit commanders, represented 70% of the punishment. It wasn't a fact, it was what? An indicator. What the hell's going on down in that unit? You know, by the way, is that the best unit? No, it's not, it's the worst. Okay? The bad statistics didn't go with the best units. And we had them lined up, sometimes 15 to 20, and depending on the size unit I was in. The bad statistics go with the low performance sectors. There was an unequal distribution. And then we say, well, who's getting promoted? Let's look at that from our demographics. Men, women, color, background, race, ethnicity. And again, but you know, in the good units, guess what it looked like? It looked okay, by exception. And I was in a class this morning where I overtalked too much probably. And I was happy to see the introduction of data. You got to be into that data. You also got to be into what's in the social network. You with me? Now, I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook, Russel Honoré, and I'm on Twitter, LTG Russel Honoré on Twitter. And if you picked up a point or two today that you want to take home with you, If you put it on my Twitter feed associated with this conference, the first 5 people do that, come get the damn free book. If you do that, will you do that? You want to play? Put it down. Back to these basic points. Do the routine things well. And oh, by the way, by the routine things well, do that with your babies at home. If they're old enough to play soccer and go to play dates, they're old enough to do what? Fix their bed, clean up after dinner. Don't raise no spoiled-ass children. I come from a boomer generation. We cursed too much. We drank too much. And I told my kids the other day, and some of the older nieces and nephews, I said, visualize your grandma in hot pants. Granny used to wear that shit. And hip huggers. And went to Woodstock. Wore no shoes, no bra. We were the boomers, we were rocking it. The summer of love, we did some wild shit. And now we're trying to tell you how to raise your kids. But that age differential in the organization is big. And we got to figure out what touched Gen Z. I'm still working on that. I got a couple of them around me in that category. That's the Zoomers. How do we bring them in? How do we keep them? We got to talk to them. Because again, I was raised by the greatest generation. The officers that taught me in the Army had been in World War II, and Korea, and Vietnam. You didn't go to those officers and say, I don't have enough of this, or you didn't give me enough time. Boy, you know how much time we had on D-Day? I jumped out the back of that Higgins boat, Higgins, that name sounded well. With 30 soldiers, I ended up with 3. What are you complaining about? I was standing on a hill in Korea, and I was telling a guy who had been in World War II and Korea War that I didn't have enough soldiers in a particular military spell, cooks. He said, Honoré, what the hell are you complaining about? He used a harsher word than that, but we ain't drinking yet, so. He said, what are you complaining about? They all can read. I felt about this big. He said, what are you complaining about? They all can read. So every generation, we got to solve a problem. But we got to go to the basics, do the routine things well, raise good kids. And I'm going to close on that note. And adapt and create change. If we ain't changing, we falling behind. We've got to optimize technology. We got to have keywords and phrases, see what our people going on LinkedIn and say they're doing. Or what they're popping in on social media. You don't have to do it, but you got to have somebody that is doing it. And do people understand the job book? Do you still do job books? Oh shit, when I got my master's in human resources, that was the big shit, job books. It gave people expectations of what was expected on the job. Standards and conduct. And we didn't nearly have the exposure, and your job was broken down and evaluated based on SKAs. That's what we called it then. But hell, I was a damn major, so that must, a lieutenant colonel, that must have been like 1985. The words have changed, but the substance is still there. What is the job? What does the job book say? That's your standards. And if you don't have them published, it's no wonder people going on the middle of the day and watching Russian porno. You with me? You got to have the standard. You got to have what's expected at the job. And the same thing with your kids. This piece on change, again, if it ain't broke, break it. Because for you to adapt for a population that's going from 7.8 $2 billion to $10 billion by 2050, we got to change a lot of things. And we got to change how we're doing things. And we got to retrain our workforce in some case to be able to adapt. So the 3 lessons on leadership: do the routine things well, right? Embrace the impossible. Have your impossible list. Whatever you do in the company has to bring value to the company and bring value to the people and value to the customers, right? And thirdly, embrace change, create change. At the end of the war, Washington was challenged by one of the native states to say, John Washington, we're not paying taxes. He was one of them little northern states. Said, we're not going to pay any taxes. And Washington said, wait a minute. He turned to his aide and said, saddle up Nelson. Nelson was the name of John Washington's white horse. He said, saddle up Nelson, we going north, give me 2,500 troops. He didn't hesitate and send a text and say, hey, will y'all reconsider? He didn't send an emissary or post anything on Facebook and said, I disagree with this policy. Because they crossed the red line, he was ready to go but can I whoop ass. When that message come to corporate headquarters that something is going on in Peoria, you with me? That's a violation of the law. What do you got to do? You got to saddle up Nelson. Write that shit down. Saddle up Nelson. And you can't wait till Monday because it's a 3-day weekend. Because by Tuesday morning, that could be in the Wall Street Journal. You got to saddle up Nelson. You got to get down there and see what the hell's going on. He saddled up Nelson. He was decisive because a rule had been broken. It wasn't about negotiating. Because whether the information is true or not, as an HR person, you got to prove it's what? It is what it is. One thing I learned in the Army, the first report is normally wrong. It's normally freaking wrong. Unfortunately, sometimes it's worse than it was reported. And many times it's less than what was reported. But you don't have an opportunity in this day and age, the way information changed and how it can change the brand or product of a company, to do what? To wait. You got to saddle up Nelson. You got to do like General Washington did. You can't wait. Well, let's see if somebody else can play, because that's going to be a hard one to deal with. Well, let's go tee the VP, and we'll put it in his lap and see what he want to do. Bullshit. That's your goddamn job. You got to verify that information because you got to protect the company, because you're not protecting just for you. You're protecting that guy that's out there guarding the damn building. The factory worker that's out on the line, that's trying to put their kids through school. Or the nurse that's working 2 shifts. If that brand goes down, what happens to all those people's jobs? Some damn CV come in and bomb and reduce everybody's pay. You know what happens when a company fails? Don't be afraid to saddle up Nelson. And you got to get the introvert out of it, and you got to go take care of business. Because somewhere in that job book and in federal law describe what is unacceptable. Too many companies wait too long to go deal with it. I tell you, the guys with the Golden Arch, they got the message. Yesterday was a little story come out on CNN about the Whopper Jr. making people sick. Shit, within a few hours, they took that sandwich off the menu. But the rest of this shit's good. Come on over here. It's just the Whopper Jr. that had the chopped slimy onions on it. Who would suspect that would give you listeria? Slimy onions coming out of a bag? You see how it can affect the brand, folks? And now we got this clothing company. That brand is toast. It's toast. And I'm not going to mention it because you see it in the paper. But you got to deal with that in HR on your side of the spectrum. Whether it's coming from the head of the office, or it's a middle manager, or a first line supervisor that's causing it, or a worker. You got to saddle up what? Get down there and figure it out. Because it can affect the entire companies. Companies have been lost over stuff like this. Because they lose their value so much, somebody come in and take them, and they destroy the company, taking it apart. Sometimes all they want is the real estate. 3 big points. My last point to you is this. Raise good kids. You all climbing the corporate ladder. You trying to be successful. We raised 4 kids. We moved 25 times. My daughter, who just transitioned from one career to the other, she was in internet marketing, working for Fortune 100, and said, I'm tired of this, and took off, went to Paris, spent a year to learn how to be a chef. I said, you crazy as hell, girl. But she did it, and now she's got a couple offers to come back and be a chef. Major city, she made a transition, but she's not coming out like a freshman chef. She's coming out with a chef with 18 years of marketing experience on the internet. And the companies want her, because she's a lieutenant as a cook, but they want that 18 years experience in how to pull that menu together and how to market the product. Raise good kids. Now, I know it's hard. You left home at 6:30. You're headed home to meet the crew. You're tired. Them kids got to go to piano lesson. They got to go to dance class. They got to go to violin class. They got to go to taekwondo. And look, they get into more shit than I've ever seen. There's always something for them to do. If you're tired, you stop in at 7-Eleven if you can find one, and get you one of them energy drinks or something, or some of that apple cider vinegar. Take a shot of that shit, because your ass got to be fired up when you get home. Because the easiest part of your day is over with. The hardest part of your day is coming to raise these kids. Y'all agree with that? So leave something in your jug for when you get home. Because the biggest legacy you will leave on this earth is not where you're in your retirement account and how many houses and property you invest in. It will be the legacy that you live with the kids that you raise. And some of you are dual working family partners, and some of you are single doing it all. But you got to save something in it. You got to raise good kids. And it starts from the beginning. I'll share our story again. We moved 25 times. And they turned out all right. You might say, how'd they turn out? Well, I'll tell you about the chef. I got another one down in Florida. She do internet marketing. COVID ran her to the house. And then they're going through changes now. And the 2 boys, they're in the family business. Both of them in the Army. One's a captain and one's a master sergeant. Both of them have been to combat. The oldest has been to combat twice. And they're doing well. I'm proud of them. And I hope you can stand there and say the same thing about your adult children. But it comes with sacrifice. It takes time, it takes energy, and your kids come first. To raise good kids, you're going to have to sacrifice. My oldest daughter, I was a lieutenant when she was born. And when she was first born, I'd walk in this house, this Army house. You could tell it was an Army house built by the Corps engineer, because the front of the house and the back of the house looked the same. Who would do shit like that, you know? So I would find my way to the kitchen. I walk in, and the little baby would be sitting in a box in the corner, and my pretty little wife was in there fixing lieutenant food, you know, spaghetti and meatballs and spaghetti one day, and we'll reverse it the next day. And it was easy up front. That little baby was in the corner doing what little babies do, you know, sleeping, releasing stuff, sleeping. After a few months, I come home, that thing would be in the box, and she'd raise her head up when she hear my voice. Okay, that was good. She got daddy recognition. A few months later, she'd stand up and shake the box for me to come grab her. So I'd go over and grab her, and I'd try to put her in her seat. Oh, hell no, you're going to hold me. I want to eat with you. I knew I shouldn't have started that shit. But that was number one. We were just working it out, you know. So she'd sit there and mess up all my uniform, eating. And then a few months later, I'd come in the back door. That thing would meet me at the door like a pet. And daddy, and I had to pick her up. A few years later, I come home and said, where's daughter number one? She's next door, go get her. A few more years passed, I was at Fort Leavenworth as a staff sergeant, came home, remember that day just like tomorrow. Where's daughter number one? Well, she's spending the weekend in the country with Farm Girl. Interesting. She's about 13 or 14. Then about a year passed. I stay off to Patriotic college and I'm teaching. And I come home one day and I'm about to cook some burgers on the back barbecue grill. And I see this thing sitting across from me with metal and shit coming out of her face. And tattoos on, which she said were fake. I said, what is that? What is that? That's fake. And she rubbed them off, she pulled all the metal off. And her hair had changed. And she was dressing different. And I said, what the hell's going on here? So I paused for a minute. And I talked to what we normally do. I talked to family and friends, Uncle Joe and them, Colonel so-and-so. Say, oh, Russ, don't worry about it. It's just a fad. It's a trend. I said, a trend my ass. This is a leadership problem. We got to deal with this. So I got home, time for supper. We said, okay, let's get the books out. Because I got some answers I didn't like. Who do you see today? Nobody. What did you learn? Nothing. So you went to school all day and didn't learn shit? Come on now. But it was attitude, right? So then we got on the track team. And I'd go with the track team and went ride horse on Saturday or something. And then by the time she got to be a junior, I bought a new car. Volkswagen. You know why? Because most of her friends were doing what their junior year? They were driving, they were middle-class kids. They were driving to school in cars. You know what it means to that kid that don't have access so they can't drive? You know the impact on them? It's a social thing, right? You don't have to do it. But if they're in that social environment, we had in a little Catholic school where all the little yuppies showed up in their cars. Some of them just had a better car than my wife. That was embarrassing. So we bought our little car. She kept it for a year, and guess what happened my senior year? I had to move her to Germany in a senior year. And people told me that was going to destroy that girl. Move her senior year. And we did that. Because I used to watch Little House on the Prairie. Y'all remember Little House on the Prairie? Shit, Laura and them moved out every 6 months. Shit, Laura ended up being a teacher. The team has to work together, right? And you got to invest in your kids. It's the best investment you can make. Because if you have a problem, on the other hand, at work, you can do what? You call HR. I had a similar problem when I took over as Army commander some years later. The older daughter, number one, is married now, and all that's working out. She got a kid. And I went in the First Army in Atlanta, and the guy said, we got a Colonel Brown here. He's an exceptional talent. West Point graduate, Rhodes Scholar, Colonel, written 2 books, historian. I said, boy, we're glad to have him on the team. Valued superstar. So the first couple of months working with Colonel Brown was a pleasure. Then all of a sudden, I don't know what got into Colonel Brown's claw, but we would have a daily stand-up meeting where everybody said, what's hot, what's not, and let's get the hell out of here and let's go knock it down. What's near term, what's midterm, what's future. We got troops redeploying this weekend. Who's going to be there to meet them, blah, blah, blah. And then we did that, and Colonel Brown came up a couple times and said, General, I think you ought to re-look that decision. I said, well, Colonel Brown, your time to vote on that decision was yesterday. And he did that shit twice. And 3 strikes was enough to tell me. I got up from my office. I went back to my office. I called my chief of staff in. I said, tell HR to tell high HR, Colonel Brown is so smart, they could use his talent in Korea. And we shipped that sumbitch out. So you can use HR at work, but you can't use that shit at home. Once you raise them, that's yours, right? And we treated Colonel Brown, we gave him an award for all his good work. We took pictures with him, gave him white flower, and even had a damn cake. Well, he left there feeling good. But he wasn't no longer on the team. You can use HR, and we used to do it in the Army, move them. He still had talent. Just put him somewhere where people can appreciate his bullshit. And be admired by it. So those are the big ones I wanted to share with you. How much time I got left for questions?
About 5 minutes.
Okay, I ran over. I'm not apologizing because I had to tell you that shit, or I wasn't going to sleep well tonight. I stayed up all last night to make sure I got that last story in. Because y'all know what the hell you're doing. You're sharpening your saw. You're getting things done. You got to make the standards work. Because if the standards are not there, everybody's doing what? They're winging it. So make sure folks understand the rules and they're following the rules. We got about 5 minutes for Q&A, and I have about a 2-minute video I want to show you. So let's say we got time for 2 questions, and I'll be quick with the answers. Is that fair enough? Questions? Or comments? Questions or comments? Just yell it out. No need for a mic. Your veterans out there, take care of them. Your first responders, send them retiring early. Bring them into Boulder. They're like the sheepdog. They're there to protect us. And that story goes, after 9/11, President Bush opened a big old can of whoop ass and he sent the sheepdogs out to protect the sheep. Because on any given day, the sheep said, why does the shepherd take such good care of the sheepdog? You see, the sheep forget sometimes the purpose of that sheepdog is to keep the wolf away. Because the sheep said, well, we pay the bills here. He sells us, he eats us, he trades us, but the sheepdog get special food and care, but they forget the purpose of the sheepdog is to do what? To protect them. Because when the wolf comes, that lone sheepdog will put his life between him and them sheep, and he know those sheep despise him. And sometimes that sheepdog will go into battle with these wolves, In the worst case, he don't come back or she don't come back. Then sometime when they come back, they're missing body parts. Or they miss functions they can't hear or they can't see. We got a lot of sheepdogs out there, folks. First responders and military that's looking for a purpose. They did what they could do when we asked them to do it. They protected the sheep when they know the sheep despised them. Because they did it because that's what the shepherd asked them to do. Seek them people out. You speak about them. You use different words, but get them sheepdogs in there. They bring value. And how you may have to accommodate for them. But how did they get the way they were? They were protecting the sheep. And they go from firemen, social workers, soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and Coast Guard. The sheepdogs are out there. Seek them. They bring value to your organization. Play the walk-off video. Come on, Marvin. Play it loud.
American girls,
louder.
And American guys will always stand up and salute. We'll always recognize when we see old glory flying. There's a lot of men dead, so we can sleep in peace at night when we lay down our heads. My daddy served in the army, where he lost his right eye, but he flew a flag out in our yard till the day that he died. He wanted my mother, my brother, my sister, and me to grow up and live happy in the land of the free. Now this nation that I love is falling under attack. A mighty sucker punch came flying in from somewhere in the back. Soon as we could see clearly through our big black eye, man, we lit up your world like the 4th of July. Hey, Uncle Sam, put your name at the top of his list, and the Statue of Liberty started shaking her fist, and the eagle will fly, and it's gonna be here when you hear Mother Freedom start ringing her bell, and it'll feel like the whole wide world is raining down on you. Oh, brought to you courtesy of the red, white, and blue. Served and the battle will rage. This big dog will fight when you rattle his cage, and you'll be sorry that you mess with the U.S. of A. 'Cause we'll put a boot in your ass. It's the American way. Hey, Uncle Sam, put your name at the top of his list, and the Statue of Liberty started shaking her fist, and the eagle will fly, and it's gonna be hell when you hear Mother Freedom start ringing her bell, and it'll feel like the whole wide world is raining down on you. All brought to you courtesy of the